Start our program, authenticating fakes, frauds, and forgeries of period furniture and clock cases. I will use these terms, fake, when referring to a completely made phony. Fraud designates an antique that has been altered, misattributed or otherwise discussed or misrepresented as what it is not. The path to the genuine is passing by the way of all the frauds. Let's talk about totally fake. This object was made from scratch to fool you. It is the object many buyers fear most, but in fact, it is the one they need fear least. After most fakes are assembled, they are attacked by denting, bruising, and gouging out areas of some primitive furniture to stimulate being handmade. One will also find excessive wear marks added, generally being much overdone and sometimes in the wrong areas as compared to the original being copied. In general, when examining original crisp edges on worn objects, they have been only slightly worn from wear and the ravages of time, when compared to a faker who tends to over-round these areas, unconspicuously giving the excesses to the original, hoping to make his point more readily accessible. I will use a hypothetical example of a chair. Once built to exacting standards to copy the original, it is dismantled and each component is burned over an open fire to initiate wear. The char is then removed and bleached to remove every trace of carbon. The chair is reassembled and presented with a thin coat of black paint. It is then coated with a wash coat of water/aliphatic resin white glue. While it's still tacky, it is covered with dust removed from a house vacuum cleaner. When it is dry, it is waxed and prepared to be smoked. The chair is elevated over a steel drum with a roaring fire inside. The dries and browns of the wood occur as it dries out. This process also results in checking and warping and twisting of some of the superstructure of the components of the chair, thus enhancing age. The next step is to remove the smell of the smoke from the chair, bathing in concentrated salt water and then in bleach baths. This could be repeated as many times as desired to ad-lib more damage. Then a piece of backsplat is removed to impart simulated wear. Only after being dunked in the sea and pounded by the surf for a while was the chair deemed ready for its debut. It takes excessive time, effort, planning, creativity, and deviance. So what was gained from this process? Probably some sort of revenge to an individual or group or museum. This object could be sold for little money to an antique dealer, say for $100, who in turn could sell many times over, possibly fetching at the final retail end, say, $10,000. Each time the item is being sold up, each dealer or auction is proudly referring to the last provenance. Antique dealers, like everyone else, are less wary of cheap finds and can be encouraged by very low prices to delude themselves into thinking the antique is a steal. All buyers should be wary of the enticement of the obviously underpriced. The first rule of antique shopping: beware of the "it's a steal" impulse. Someone else is doing the stealing to you. The market value of antique furniture generally does not allow fair payment for such talent, time, skill, imagination, and perseverance as the degree of faking just was explained. But how about an old fake, 50 to 75 years or 100 years ago? Making fakes was economically worthwhile then. Fortunately, the old fake usually suffers from its age, and you benefit. The years pass, hoaxing will become more apparent. The ravages of time after a premature aging reveal rather than conceal. As the wood shrinks and moves, the finish changes, and as more is learned about genuine antiques, the fake comes to look more antiqued than antique. Producing a new object from old parts. Combining elements from one form to create another is common fraud. Many old pieces of period furniture are taken apart and reconstituted into another object, such as the turnings from an old spinning wheel. These can form a tripod candle stand base. Floor and wall boards and other architectural elements are irresistible to furniture fakers. The beautiful wood boards that were leaves for a 19th century dining table are routinely reborn as tabletops. Drawer fronts and case sides. Fakers devise wondrous ways of remaking old parts into present-day antiques. Their imaginations are bound only by the availability of old wood. The disastrous World War II bombings of Britain proved to be a boon to English craftsmen engaged in the parts new object trade. Now let's talk about make up a set. A variation of an old parts new object is the made up set. Some sets of chairs are assembled, that is, composed of chairs from two or more sets. The more variations of chairs in a set, the less value of the assemblage. Another type of made up set is the enlarged set. Often a set of chairs was enlarged with new reproductions and copied directly from one of the old chairs. Many of these sets were enlarged long ago. The additions may have been made not to deceive, but to accommodate more dinner guests, but don't let that deceive you. Every chair must be examined, for enlarging was common practice at that point. The longer ago a set was enlarged, the more valuable the added members. 2 copies added to in a 1780 to 10 Chippendale chairs made in 1760 will probably go unnoticed, and that is just fine. All are period chairs. If the chairs were added a century later, the new ones are 19th century reproductions and should be evaluated as such. When all of the sets but one seems to be of one age, make sure that several are of the odd chairs. The antique may be the single objects reconfigured. In this category, we will find the lower part of a high chest that passes as a dressing table. A high chest reconstituted from a remnant needling cabriole legs and an upper case. The high chest top that became a chest of drawers, and the flap top, high top chest that gained a pediment because pedimented high chests bring much, much higher prices. You may even find a new case built around 4 old legs, and that's just high chest. In some shops, not very long ago, a bustling business was done in slenderizing. Bureaus were made narrower because narrow cases sold better than wide ones. The chest was remade to suit a taste for slender cases, which have little antique value now as an antique. The most common way to enhance old furniture has been to add carving. And the most commonly added carving is a fan or two of the case drawers out of an antique shop, which became a common fixture. Forged or misread inscriptions, added labels, and the like have been used to enhance the value of an antique by bestowing upon it history it never had. The otherwise genuine antique becomes a fraud when labeled with a lie.